What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show. My name's John Moore. In today's video, I'm going to be going over with you guys the basic anatomy of the banjo. I'm just going to be going over the names of the parts and what they're for to sort of familiarize yourself with the instrument a little bit, okay? So we're going to be starting off here up at the peg head of the instrument. That's what this is called up here. This is the peg head, and that's where your tuning pegs are located. Now, these little metal things here, you'll see them on the back of the banjo. These little metal things with little keys on them, those are your tuning pegs. Now, you'll see a few little screws on mine. That's because mine have detuners built into them. Yours probably will not have those unless you have a higher-end banjo. But yours also may be pointed out sideways rather than straight back. That's perfectly normal too. That just means that you have geared keys. These are geared too, but these are geared in a way that they still have the traditional straight back look to them. So a geared key is definitely preferable to one that is not geared, and I don't know if they're really making many banjos anymore, beginner banjos that are not geared. Anyway, so a geared banjo is a geared tuning peg is a lot easier to tune with. Now, how we tune is we just simply twist the peg, and that's the little plastic part, and one direction will drop it down, and one will bring it back up. Now, the strings, how they're strung on this, they should start out on the inside, towards the inside of the peg head, and then wrap around, sort of in a counterclockwise motion on these upper pegs, and in a clockwise motion on these lower pegs, okay? So they're going to be, the strings will always be on the inside portion, towards the inside of the peg head, and then wrap around towards the outside of the tuning pegs, okay? So moving on down a little bit, we've got a capo. Now, this is not actually part of the banjo. You buy these separately. This is a very specific type of capo. This is a page capo is what they're called, and these have a little screw on them, and what they allow you to do is they allow you to change the key that you're playing in by simply sliding it up and down like this and tightening it. Now, you'll also have some that are shaped like clamps, and you simply squeeze them and let them go. There are too many styles to really go over with that, but that's just to say that what it does is it takes you from, say, a G tuning up to an A tuning or a B tuning. Okay, so it'll take you anywhere you need to go as far as changing keys on the banjo, up to a C chord. You can maybe take it up to a D chord if you're doing some Stanley style stuff, but this will take you all the way up to a C. These page capos like this, if you are looking at something like this to play in a different key, say in C, a lot of songs are played, say on records, they're not played in the open key on the banjo, they're played in A, or they're played capoed up in the B position or even the C position. You're going to need a capo that can reach across and go around the fifth string. These little page capos, if you just get a standard banjo one, they won't fit around this. They're too narrow. You have to get an extra wide one, or you have to get a guitar one. This one's just an extra wide banjo one that will fit around, so I can capo up to a C. And the tuning sort of goes out a little bit as you go up. Banjos are kind of finicky with their tuning when you capo them, and that's just been my experience. There's a joke in the bluegrass community that, well, if you throw a guitar player and a banjo player off an airplane, which one will hit the ground first? Well, it's the guitar player, because the banjo player will have to stop and tune on the way down. You listen to any live bluegrass record, you'll hear a banjo player in the background tuning between songs. That's just because these things are always going out of tune. That's just part of it. Now, moving on up just a smidget here, this little white thing that the strings run through, okay, that's called your nut, and it runs perpendicular to the neck, okay, so it's running this way. This little part right here, that is the nut. Now, they can be made out of plastic, they can be made out of bone. Nicer ones are made out of bone. This one's made out of mother of pearl. You can get them in a bunch of different materials. I actually cut this one myself. I bought a little pearl blank and just cut it out of it. And, bone, pearl, plastic, they really don't make that big of a difference in the sound, truth be told. Just so long as there's a nut there, and there should definitely be one there, and there is one there. But yeah, there's really not a huge difference in them. Maybe once you upgrade from a plastic to a bone, there will be a tiny difference, but hardly noticeable. Moving on up just a little more, you're going to see the fretboard. Now on the fretboard, you'll see mine's black, yours might be brown. That's just different types of wood. This is an ebony fretboard in this case. If it's brown, it's rosewood. Really inconsequential. Really doesn't matter, but you'll see that this is the fretboard, and it's a different color than the rest of the instrument usually. Now the frets, these little metal slivers here that you'll see run across here in increments, they get tighter and tighter. These are called frets. Now, what these do is they give you a clean sound when you fret the instrument. If you've ever maybe tried plucking a fiddle or a violin, it kind of gives you a bit of a dull sound if you just try plucking it, because your finger, where it's soft, it mutes the sound of the string. So if I just try pressing, say on the fret, I get a dull sound, okay? So when we press down on a fret, we want to press right behind it. So we're not on, when I say we're on, say, the second fret, which is 1, 2, okay, so open, 1, 2, on the second fret. When I say we're on the second fret, we're not actually on top of that wire, because that dulls the string, it deadens the string. We're behind it. Ideally, when we fret the instrument, we want to fret it as close to the metal wire as possible, because if we get too far back, we start to get a little bit of a buzz. And likewise, if we don't use enough pressure, we get that. So even if we're close to the fret and we don't use enough pressure, it begins to deaden the string. But it's pretty hard to do that with a banjo. A banjo is a fairly forgiving instrument on the fingers. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to get good notation out of a banjo. Now, moving on up, we're actually going to start to see some little dots as we go on up the neck. We're going to see a dot here and here and here and here and here, and then there's 2 dots here. Now what those are is we've got a dot on the first fret. Some banjos don't have it, but most of them will have the dot on the first fret. We'll have a dot on the 3rd fret. We'll have a dot on the 5th fret, a dot on the 7th fret, on the 10th fret, and on the 12th fret. Now these dots are on what we call the binding of the instrument. That's on the side of the neck, and that's for the player to sort of know where he's at, because there's a lot of frets going on up here, and this just sort of helps you find where you are on the neck whenever you're doing some fast picking and you're trying to improv, or you're just trying to learn and you need to go to the 12th fret. Well, we've got our 2 dots here on the 12th fret. Now here at the 12th fret, you just heard an interesting little chime right there. Now that little chime is called a harmonic. Now all instruments will do this, all stringed instruments will do this at their halfway point. They'll also do it on their 5th fret, or the equivalent of their 5th fret. They'll do it on their 7th fret, just behind the 9th fret. A little bit tricky, that one is. Somewhere in there. We've got our, of course, this one's the one that rings the most. It's halfway. Now this is dead center, halfway between the bridge and the nut. Now what this does is this is actually our octave point. So our scale starts over here. And that's how come. You've got equal distance of string on each side of this part. So whenever I pick the G string, if I come up here and pick it, it's the same note, just an octave higher. So the scale starts over. So, for instance, this should be pretty close to the 5th string, right there, which is also tuned in G, but an octave higher. So this is our starting over point. Now, as we go on up, what we're going to find is we've got this little metal ring here that runs around this, and it holds down a little skin here on the top of our banjo. Now we call this a skin. It used to be made out of skin. Now it's plastic. You'll find them from different brands. 5-star, Remo. I like Remo Weather Kings. They're my favorite type of head. But this is the banjo head. This white part here is called the banjo head. Now this white part here is actually frosted. It's clear. You'll see that it's actually worn through here because I've worn through the frosting. There's not actually a hole in the banjo head. It's just the frosting is worn off, so now it appears clear because the plastic itself is clear. The little metal loop that goes around it that holds it down is called the tension hoop. All these little things, all these little brackets around here that hold the tensioning hoop down, they're facing out this way. Well, they're called brackets. You may have a little metal ring underneath it, and that's called a tone ring. okay? And that'll be beneath the little metal loop that holds your banjo head in place, okay? So there will be the tension hoop, there will be a little piece of metal that runs around for your banjo head, okay? So don't mistake that for your tone ring. And then there will be a tone ring, possibly if you're on a nicer banjo, something $400 and up, you may have a tone ring in your banjo, and that just enhances the tone of it. Now, on down below that, you may see a little wooden rim, and that is just that's the wooden pot. That's a little that's a lip that the tone ring sits on for the banjo. So some banjos, they won't have that. Some of them are just all metal. My first one I started out with was all metal, didn't have a wooden pot. This one has a wooden pot in it, just enhances the tone, it just changes the tonal characteristics of it. On down below that, we'll have a little metal ring right here that sits at the very main back. It sort of forms a shelf back here with little holes in it. Now that is called the flange. Now the flange is what allows sound to come out of what this is back here, the resonator. Now some instruments, some banjos are open back. Now if it's open back, you won't have a resonator. You'll probably have a wooden pot though. So in this case, because we have a resonator, there has to be a flange, one, to hold the resonator on, and also to let the sound out. So as the head vibrates, as you pluck the strings, the vibrations go into the resonator, and the resonator forces those sounds back forward, which improves the tone of the instrument and the volume. So if your banjo is really loud, you can actually take your resonator off if you have a resonator on your banjo, and it'll quieten it down substantially. Now, moving on down here a little further, we've got this little wooden piece right here that the strings run across. This is called the bridge. Now, the bridge, you'll find it made out of different materials, maple and ebony, and you'll have man-made ivory in there, or if you get something a little bit older, you might have something that has actual ivory in it. In this case, it's fairly inconsequential as to what your materials are. To be honest with you, I've had ivory, and I've had man-made ivory, and I've had ebony and maple. Truth be told, they make some difference, but it's not as big as what a lot of people who nerd out about this make it out to be. Don't worry about your gear too much. You can play and make perfectly good music on a cheaper instrument. So what we've got here, like I said, this is the bridge, and we actually we use this to sort of change the tone of our music depending on how close we play to it. So we don't actually make any alterations to the bridge, but depending on how we play it, and there I am going out of tune. If we move up here a little bit, changes the tone of the instrument depending on how close we play to the bridge. Some people will call this the X and Y position. I just say near the bridge and away from the bridge, truth be told. We've got this little area behind the bridge. That's good for driving people crazy. It really doesn't serve any purpose besides just giving a little space between the tailpiece. Now that's this little metal piece back here. This is called the tailpiece. Now what this does is it just gives you a place to hook your strings on. Your strings have little loops on the back that let you hook them in there, and when you run it, it holds the strings in place so you can tension them and tune them. Okay, so this is where you hook your strings on when you run the strings through. Okay, and that's all this does. And the tailpiece can be adjusted to change the tone of the instrument a little bit, to put more or less tension on the head. And likewise, these brackets can be adjusted to change the tension on the head, and that's part of the banjo setup. But that's a little more advanced stuff. Now you may see this little thing going on here, and you may wonder why your banjo doesn't have one of these. This is an armrest. Now your banjo may have one. I don't want to make that assumption, but if it's a cheaper banjo, it might not. This is just an armrest, and what it does is it just sort of protects your arm from this sharp corner on the edge of the tension loop. Okay, so it just sort of gives you a little more comfort while you're playing. Some people like to stand them off really far from the head. My experience has been they just settle right back down anyway, so I just leave it bottomed out, and it just makes the playing experience a little more comfortable. Now, one thing I forgot to mention as I was introducing you guys to the tuning pegs is that there's actually a fifth one down here at the 5th fret. Now, this one, the reason it's up here is because it allows you to tune the string higher. It effectively shortens the neck and shortens the length of the string, much like what happens when we fret a string. So when we take a string and we fret it, say the bomb string, and we take it up to the 5th fret, or up to the 9th fret, or the 12th, it gets higher as we go up. And this string here, having it up here 5 frets, effectively shortens the neck by 5 frets for this for this particular string. And because this string is tensioned the same and is the same diameter, the same gauge of string as our bottom string, it actually is the same note as the bottom string on the 5th fret. Now this 5th string is the highest note, it's the highest string open on the banjo. So in order of highest to lowest, it's this. Alright? And how the strings are ordered is not in order of highest to lowest, but rather they're ordered in order of bottom to top. So we go from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those are the names of the strings. The 1st string, the 2nd string, the 3rd string, the 4th string, and the 5th string. So it's just bottom to top is how they're ordered. So when I call out the 3rd string, you pluck the 3rd string. If I call out the 3rd string on the 2nd fret, then you'll count up 1, 2 to the 2nd fret, and then you pluck the 3rd string. And of course, we're fretting on the third string. Same thing for the 1st string at the 9th fret. We count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we hit the 1st string. That's the bottom string. And it's as simple as that. So the picking of this, it's relatively easy how to play this, or how to call them out. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it. Even myself, trying to call these out to you, because I've been playing so long and I've played by ear, it makes it a little bit difficult sometimes for me to think back to, okay, that's the 3rd string or that's the 4th string, because I just play by ear and I know the song, I know the strings by their sound and not necessarily by their numbers instinctively now, because it's been so long. But that being said, it's easy to learn. It came back to me easily. It came to me pretty easily the first time, and it will come to you pretty easily as well, as long as you practice. So the last thing I want to mention to you guys is the picks. So you may have noticed that I'm picking with these picks here that have pointed tips on them. Now these are called Ernie Ball picky picks. I don't actually recommend that you start out with these. I started out with these, but I don't recommend it. I pick with these because I'm just used to them. They actually don't give you the best tone. And I've actually been working on switching over to the more standard and more common rounded style of pick. But you won't see me picking a lot on these videos because it still sort of trips me up a little bit, actually. But these are the much more common type. They have the rounded, sort of a spade shape to them. These picks do. But I'll have a video about picks and the effect on tone, because these have a better tone to them. I'll do a video on picks and their effect on tone later in the next couple videos. But suffice to say, whatever picks you're doing, as long as you're using 2 metal finger picks, you can use these if you want to. It's really no big deal. You can switch back and forth to the other ones, and it's really not that big of a deal. But it's better off to start you off with what the standard is. That being said, what you are going to need is whatever finger pick you choose, they need to be metal, and you need a plastic thumb pick. And it needs to be sized appropriately. Now, if your thumb pick is too little or too big, you can resize it to an extent by dropping it in a pot of boiling water. But we'll talk about that, once again, like I said, in a later video. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about tuning the instrument, how to tune it, how to use a tuner, what is the tuning order of the string, and the different tunings of the instrument, because there's not just the standard open G tuning. We've got D tunings and C tunings and B tunings and G minor tunings and all kinds of augmented tunings and D minor tunings. All kinds of good stuff to experiment with there. But anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please be sure to leave it a like below if you found it helpful, and subscribe if you want to follow these lessons and see more videos like this. I'll see you in the next one. Later.